This is a little experiment where I talk briefly about photography. I've been taking pictures since the 1960s. Made the switch to digital fairly early. And now I have abandoned my film cameras. I have a bunch of old film cameras, but I don't shoot film anymore. That's partly because I'm a little disabled. And I like the immediacy of digital photography. I do know how to do darkroom black and white work, but in order to get negatives and then to scan them, and then it's fairly tedious. I do have some adapters for a Sony AEEFB6697A0C, which allows me to use a lot of the old film glass. And I played around with that a bit. I had a couple of Carl Zeiss lenses, a 28 and a 35 millimeter. The real nice fixed ones, and fixed focal length. And Sony has a real clever way to allow you to zoom in for manual focus and get precise focusing. And I played around with that for a couple of months, but I've gone back to shooting strictly digital. I am fighting to carry around a very heavy D7100 Nikon with a 18-140 lens on it, which weighs about 6 tons. And that's kind of tedious as well. The Sony AEEFB6697A0C is manageable. It's a nice little camera. And you can just shoot carefully with it, or carelessly with it, or casually with it. And the results are pretty good. But like a lot of guys who are into photography, we're always searching for the silver bullet, the perfect camera for all situations, and of course it doesn't exist. One other experiment recently is to play with a 35 millimeter Nikkor lens, which basically brings me all the way back to shooting film 35 millimeter with a 50 millimeter lens. It's basically the same focal length when you do all the mathematics. And having been using 18 to 55s, it's quite startling to be stuck at 30. Not a bad thing, just a really different thing. The area I live in, I basically feel some days like I've completely covered it, or even over-covered it. It's hard to do people pictures in this area. Everybody stays home or is at work, so everybody's inside. There are no crowds particularly. There are a few events where people get out. And I have gone to Canada Day parades and shot those. They're interesting. They're fun. I do a lot of landscape photography. And of course I am captured and a slave to my dog and the cats who live here. So I take their portraits quite often.